So you're a hard gainer, naturally skinny, somebody who just can't seem to gain weight. Influencers on social media make it look so easy to gain muscle and look incredible. Why can't you? The science on this is very clear. There are three main variables that we should consider when trying to gain weight, especially lean muscle mass. The first one being you have to stimulate the muscle to grow by introducing an appropriate muscular training stimulus. The second one being you have to consume the right nutrients to provide the body with the needed building blocks for muscular growth. And lastly, you have to consider your genetic potential. We all have a genetic ceiling for building muscle, but odds are if you look something like this, you can definitely still add some muscle. We've all heard it before. My metabolism is so fast, it's basically impossible for me to gain weight. So let's look into that. What determines metabolic speed? Science has identified 4 major components: the amount of muscle mass you have, your age, your gender, and your activity level. Oh, and lastly, your thyroid, the primary hormonal gland responsible for your metabolic speed. An overactive thyroid, also known as hyperthyroidism, could be the reason for an increased metabolic speed. But even this doesn't mean you can't gain weight. You just have to know how to overcome it. In all my years of coaching, I've noticed a few trends in people who struggle with weight gain. The first thing I notice is a lack of appropriate nutrition. Most people who struggle to gain weight believe that they are eating more than enough. They would usually say something like, "I eat like a machine and still can't gain weight." But when we actually track their intake, it's way below what's needed to gain muscle. So my first recommendation would be to write down everything you eat in a day for a whole week. After doing that, take one day and log in everything you ate for that week into a calorie tracking app like MyFitnessPal. This will help you see what your true average intake is for the week. To gain weight, you have to be in a caloric surplus, meaning that you have to consume more energy in a day than your body needs to perform basic functions. You can use a calorie calculator online for free to determine the amount of calories you need to be in a caloric surplus. Most people will notice that it's pretty hard to consume the needed amount of food in a day to truly gain muscle, especially if you eat foods that aren't calorie dense, like vegetables and salads. Now, don't get me wrong, they're important in any well-balanced diet, but if your goal is to gain weight, then you want to eat as much calories as possible before feeling full, and these low-calorie dense foods will make you feel full much too fast. Top-level athletes like Olympic lifters and swimmers consume upwards of 6,000 calories a day. That's 6 to 8 meals that look like this. The easiest way to add low volume calories is to drink a mass builder shake or to make a smoothie similar in calorie and macronutrient content. I mentioned that appropriate nutrient intake is important. This means we can't only look at calories, we also have to look at macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats. The latest research shows that an average of 1.2 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass should be consumed for optimal muscle protein synthesis, muscular growth. Therefore, if you weigh 70 kilograms, you should aim to eat at least 100 to 160 grams of protein per day. Elite athletes push this even higher, getting up to 3 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass. With experience, I can tell you that it's practically impossible to naturally eat this way. The importance of meal prepping really comes into play here. You will always choose the easy way out. If you're tired or busy, you just won't eat optimal. Therefore, prep your meals ahead of time. Make sure that you get enough protein in. I'm sharing a list of my favorite muscle building meals on Instagram today. Feel free to check it out, I'll leave the link below. Next up, we should look at training stimulus for muscle building. When exercising, progressive overload is important. To stimulate muscle growth, we have to show the body that its current strength level just isn't enough. It needs to build more muscle to help you lift the needed weight. 3 main variables play a role here. The first one being training intensity. In other words, how heavy are you lifting? Next up is training volume, being the total amount of sets you do per body part. And lastly, time under tension, meaning how much time is the muscle spending in a contractile position, or how far to failure are you pushing the muscle. The key to stimulate muscle growth with exercise is to not overcomplicate it. Get comfortable with one exercise per major muscle group. Great examples of this include the dumbbell press for chest, the seated row for back, the squats for legs, the military press for shoulders, dumbbell curls for biceps, rope extensions for triceps, and deadlifts for compound axial loading. Fun fact, compound movements like deadlifts have been shown to increase testosterone levels, which is the primary hormone responsible for muscle mass, especially on the male frame. As mentioned earlier, the final major determining factor influencing total lean muscle mass is your genetic potential. This has been thoroughly investigated in the scientific world, and a clear genetic ceiling is evident in most people. For example, let's look at our Olympic long-distance runner Eliud Kipchoge. This is him as a young boy, and this is him now. And let's look at Phil Heath, our bodybuilding Olympia winner. This is him as a young boy, and him now. Clearly we can see that genetically there's something behind the amount of muscle mass we carry on our frame. This something is what we in the science world like to call muscle fiber types. Two fiber types exist, and our genetics predominantly determines the ratio of how much we have of each. So why is this important? Well, one of the muscle fiber types, let's call it type 1, has a much higher potential for aerobic capacity. Thus, people with a higher ratio of these are our endurance athletes. And unfortunately, the bulking capacity of our type 1 fibers just aren't as much as our type 2 fibers. Reason being that our type 2 fibers are predominantly responsible for heavy lifting. These are our anaerobic muscles, and Olympic lifters are full of them. You might be wondering, where is my genetic ceiling? And how do I know if I've truly reached it? Knowing your estimated genetic potential is much easier than knowing if you've truly reached your genetic ceiling. But to put it in simple terms, look at your bloodline, your mom, your dad, your grandparents. They will be great indicators of genetic potential. This does not mean that you can't add more muscle mass to your frame than they have, but there remains a clear difference between a tall, linear body type and a stronger, stockier body type. All in all, what we can take away from this video is that gaining muscle isn't impossible. We don't eat as much as we think we do, and progressive overload in training sessions is very important for muscular growth. I really hope you got some value from this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next Monday. Cheers.